The other analytics that we sometimes look at is sort of the podcast neighborhood. So what other shows are people who listen to your show also listening to? And that can tell you a lot about the tastes of your audience. Like, maybe they're sure, predictably, if you make a business show, they're listening to other business shows. Oh, but look, there's also a strong contingent of your audience that's listening to, I don't know, true crime or faith-based shows or something like that. That can give you some insight into who you're dealing with and who you're talking to. And you can use that to inform the content to make it even more relevant to them.
Welcome to the Marketing Expedition Podcast, an auditory journey through the latest in marketing, branding, and advertising. Now, here's your Marketing Expedition guide, Ray Allen.
On this episode of the Marketing Expedition Podcast, I get to speak with Jen Moss. And as the Chief Creative Officer of JAR, co-founder Jen Moss loves bringing stories to life. With her clients, Jen acts as the podcasting doula, helping them harness their strengths in service of great storytelling. Deeply steeped in the creative process, Jen is unafraid of its ambiguities and enjoys guiding others through its twists and turns. Drawing on her strong background in theater, arts journalism, audio documentary, and new media storytelling, Jen helps clients tell the authentic stories that matter to them and to their audience. She spent many years working as a producer and award-winning content creator for CBC Radio and as an interactive storytelling producer for the National Film Board of Canada's Digital Studio, which taught her to think of stories as living things full of potential for impact. It also taught her to take an audience-first approach. Jen is never afraid of surfacing big ideas, but understands that sometimes it's the little things, that specific lens that only you can bring, that will gain the most traction with an audience. Jen loves to look for fresh tracks in the form of stories that haven't been told before. She encourages her clients and her team at JAR to try out new ideas, learn from what the audience data reveals, and let that inform future creative strategy. Finally, Jen keeps her own professional learning curve alive as she lectures part-time at the University of British Columbia's School of Creative Writing, interacting with the next generation of writers, podcasters, new media producers, and audiences. And this will be a great episode full of things to learn and know about. If you're thinking about doing a podcast or you already are a podcaster, I know I got lots of wisdom from what she had to share. So stay tuned for that. But now it's time for your Marketing Essentials moment, the basics that you need to help you continue to build your brand and your bottom line.
Today's topic, I want to address the metrics that we use to help understand if what we're doing is working, and then what to stop, start, keep, or tweak doing. And there are a number of KPIs. I like to call them kept promise indicators, or key performance indicators is what they're really called, but kept promise indicators. You can think about a variety of things that you can measure in marketing, because sometimes it is hard to measure brand awareness. For example, you can use things like sentiment scoring on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely is it that someone would refer you to somebody else? Or, sentiment scoring kind of is a gut feeling, right? So some ways you can track it, but the things that we look at that we can track that have, more quantifiable rather than, qualitative, we want to understand the numbers. And we use a scorecard, and we update our scorecard in not just vanity metrics, but we're looking at the types of things that get traction in what we're doing. And so we've set up a number of scorecards for our clients. We've used Google Looker Studio to connect data into some dashboards and do some things with our social media tools that we use called Peppershock to track the numbers and understand what's going on. And our assistant plugs in the numbers for us, because we used to try to have everybody own their own numbers, and it didn't always get updated, but we've got somebody who is owning the numbers for us now, which is a lovely thing because it gets done. And then we can review that in our weekly, we have a bi-weekly marketing meeting that we go through our numbers. We look at what's working, what's not, what to stop, start, keep, or tweak on an ongoing basis. And the nice thing is that we have this as now what's trending over the last couple of years, that we can look at the different tabs of the different numbers that we've had. So ideas that you can use to own your numbers, and hopefully you can have some help in getting the numbers reported on, or you can even sync things up where it'll automatically do it. And you can use AI to help you with a lot of these things. But think about what it is that what goals do you have? What are the goals and objectives? And it can be a number of things. Are you, wanting, if you're a nonprofit, are you wanting to get, more donations in the door? Are you wanting, if you're having an event, is it increasing the number of people who are attending, the number of right people who are attending? Is it, raising a certain amount of money? Is it, if you're in sales, is it the number of phone calls you're making? And, what are those conversion rates? All of those KPIs have very different meanings for how you can use them in a regular, ongoing way to make decisions and adjust your strategy if it's needed. So if you're tracking all of the metrics, but you're not understanding what they mean or how you can use that to your advantage, you're distracting yourself. So why it matters that we need to continue to track our KPIs, because if we don't measure what we treasure, right, it's not going to become important. So yeah, I always say, automate what you hate, measure what you treasure, and dump what you don't. But if you think about the KPIs and the decisions that you can make based on what's trending and what's working, that is going to significantly increase your marketing spend and get you the ROI that, of course, the financial people all want to hear, right? So, for example, if we look at one KPI that would be a primary that we must track, what are maybe some of the supporting metrics that can also indicate some information for you as well? So if you are looking at the numbers and you want to understand things like reach and impression or visibility in your brand, branded search volume, shared voice, other people talking about you, accelerating through word of mouth, those types of things. How are you going to track those? Are you going to, if it's a video, are you going to track the watch time that people are watching your videos? Are you going to look at follower growth? Are you going to look at website new users or visitors or traffic, and if they're staying on your site longer or if they're bouncing quicker? All things to consider. If you're thinking about lead generation, thinking about how you can do a scale of what constitutes a qualified lead versus just maybe a suspect versus a prospect versus the actual qualified lead. Are they coming to you because they're interested, or are you seeking them out and thinking out how you're going to find those qualified leads? Another thing you can look at is the cost per lead. We look at customer acquisition costs. We look at conversion rates. We look at click-through rates and form completion rates, for example, lead to call booked rate. So if you've got this wonderful qualified lead, do they book time with you on your calendar to talk with you? We use Calendly or Schedule Once to automate the system so people can automatically book time with you. And are they doing it? Maybe there's something that's getting hung up, and why? Is there something that's going on with your technology, your tech stack that's not syncing right, or whatever? These things that you can look at if you've got somebody who's interested and they start booking, but then they bounce, right? What's wrong? What's going on? Other KPI ideas, revenue, of course, is a big one, but pipeline value. Thinking about your sales cycle, your proposal to close time, your average deal size, what that close rate is. If you've done, 10 proposals and you only close 2 of them, right? Your close rate's not going to be as high as if you closed 100% of them. Looking at, again, customer acquisition cost, meaning all of the money and all of the time that you're spending on acquiring a new customer through a certain period of time. How many new customers did you get during that period of time? And is your customer acquisition cost going down, or is it going up? But then the other thing that you could look at too is lifetime value of your customer. If your lifetime values of your customers are going up and you have to spend a little bit more to make a little bit more, that's something to look at and understand with your KPIs. Retention rate, another thing to look at as a KPI is, have you retained the clients, the number of clients that you gained? Repeat purchase rate, repeat, customer rate, if they're retainers or if they're just, one-off project kind of thing. Look at your net revenue retention. Are you organically growing the accounts that you already have and retaining to continue to give them new things that they can do that are going to be valuable? And what to stop, start, keep, or tweak. Just because something worked last year doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work this year with all of the new changes and all of the new tools and technology that we have. So just think about how you're going to use the scorecard to understand the metrics. And even if you have to just focus on one metric for 30 days, if that's all you can do, it's better than nothing, right? If it's, understanding your qualified leads that are booked and form fills that are completely filled and calendar appointments that were completely made. What is it that you are doing? Maybe there's some areas to tweak. Maybe you need a clear call to action. Maybe your landing page needs cleaned up. Maybe the form fill, maybe something's getting stuck there. Maybe there's questions that they're not wanting to answer that you have set as required. And so thinking through, what is the process that they're going through? How do you measure it? How do you keep up with that so that you can continue to convert and have those big wins and better results because you've focused on tracking what's working and what's not? So if you are interested and would like to have us look at how we can help you with your scorecard, reach out to us, right? You can always hit me up on LinkedIn or, go to peppershock.com. But it's definitely something that we work a lot with on scorecards and tracking and trying to automate what we can. You can't automate everything, but we can certainly do as much as we can to help with this process so that you can understand your numbers and what those can mean for your business or for your marketing strategy and plan and all the things, right? Okay, with that, let's get into the interview.
Welcome to the Marketing Expedition podcast. I'm your host, Ray Allen. I'm the president and CEO of Peppershock Media and the founder of the Marketing Expedition community. And today's guest, we have Jen Moss with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. I love the title Marketing Expedition. It's very exciting. I feel like we're going on a fun journey.
We are going to go on a fun marketing journey together.
Yeah.
So Jen, let's just give a little more history, a little background into what you're doing now, kind of what got you where you are, and just share with us a little bit more about you.
Okay, sure. Well, let's see. I co-founded my company with another guy called Roger Nairn back in 2017, and we're called JAR Podcast Solutions. We make audio and video podcasts, and we market them as well. And we work with various brands and organizations to do that. However, my big thing is that just because these are podcasts funded and underwritten by brands does not mean that they have to be like direct sales tools, that these are actually audience-driven, story-based, really engaging and compelling podcasts that people actually want and choose to listen to. So that's what we do, and that's sort of rooted in my own background as a storyteller. I worked for CBC Radio for many years as a producer and writer, and the National Film Board of Canada as a new media story producer. And I've just always been motivated by people's stories and what makes people tick, and like human beings are so fascinating. And so I love what I do, and that's I guess what I bring to the job.
So are you, I know that you're doing this podcast too, but do you use this as a tool to help market what you do too?
Podcasting? Oh, definitely. Yeah. So my business partner and I spend a lot of time speaking to other marketers, other storytellers, and other creatives, just about the type of work that we do and how we do it. I guess we're kind of a success story because we're a small company, but we've been around since 2017 through a lot of ups and downs. And we've figured out a way of working with brands that preserves the creative process and manages to keep the content feeling fresh and authentic, rather than kind of overly corporate or overly salesy. Mm-hmm. And so I guess that's what we're known for, and we've been very privileged and lucky to be able to do that over the years. Yeah. Yes, but definitely podcasting ourselves, big part of what we do is talk about the behind the scenes, talk about the stories, talk about what makes us tick, because that's what podcasts can really do well, I think, is they can sort of lift the lid on a process or give you space to describe the nuances of an issue or a product or a to kind of weigh in on some topical things that might be happening in the vertical in which your company works or something like that. So it's just a way of shining a light, going backstage. Like to me, that's how I think about podcasts. It's just this other layer of almost metafictive commentary on the jobs that people do and the lives that people live.
You want to share an example of a podcast that you have helped with your clients? Like, give me some good examples of things that have been accomplished because of them working with you, and how they went through the process and what it means to them to have done so.
Oh, sure. I mean, we do some work with Amazon, and we've done that since 2017. And we work for a particular kind of department there, or area called the Small Business Accelerator, and we make a show called This is Small Business. And Amazon, being the behemoth that they are, was dealing with this perception that they weren't helpful to small business, and it is a complicated issue. It's not straightforward, but one way to look at it is that Amazon, like 65% of the individual businesses on their platform do identify as small businesses. So Amazon, that's a lot of businesses that do a lot of small businesses that work through the Amazon platform. And so they really wanted to create something that would service that community. And, in the process, I think we're hoping to help correct the perception that they are totally anti-small business. I mean, that is a long and deep argument, and we could have it. but I think that what I've seen from working within this particular area of Amazon is that they have created a show that not only supports a lot of small businesses, but highlights and features the stories of a lot of diverse small business owners, and it's hosted by a wonderful host called Andrea Marquez. She's a bilingual Spanish English speaking host. She comes from an immigrant community of entrepreneurs, Mexican entrepreneurs, and she's been able to bring all of that to bear in her interviewing and her storytelling. And so they actually did do an audience impact study that showed that people's impressions of the brand before and after listening to the podcast. It's now a video podcast, but when we did the study, it was still just an audio podcast. And it did show a marked uptick in sort of brand trust and perception of them as being supportive of small businesses. So the kind of the impact goal that the brand had there was served by this podcast, and we have the study to prove it, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, especially when the brands will take the time to do the studies like that to understand if it's not. Or...
not all of them can afford to do that, and we understand that. But I mean, we also have, for example, another smaller client that's a regional client here in British Columbia, where I'm from. And they're called Genome British Columbia, and they're a nonprofit organization with government funding, and part of their goal, or their main goal, I guess, is to promote genomic science, its potential for problem solving, for business and growth and things like that in the province. Now, they had a podcast, but it was very dry and very kind of on the nose, and it was just like, tell us about why genomics are good for business kind of thing, and it's just quite dry. And so it wasn't particularly serving an audience. And what they decided to do was shift gears because they realized they really needed to win the hearts and minds of like the next generation to keep them interested in genomics and to keep kind of the ball rolling with genomic research and genomic entrepreneurship. So we were given the task of revamping the podcast and making it appeal to a younger audience. So making, we took that mission to mean making it more fun, making it a bit shorter and tighter edit, using a lot more accessible storytelling and active storytelling in how we approached it. And we changed the name. We changed it from something like, genomics, the code of life, to we changed it to Nice Genes, like GENES, and just had a little more fun with it. You know what I mean? We hired a really fun host called Dr. Kaylee Byers, who is a self-declared rat detective. She studies the impact of sort of environment and genes on rat populations in poverty-stricken regions of Vancouver. Wow. And, really fascinating stuff, right? And she's very funny also. And so like just by sort of tweaking the tone, tweaking the title, tweaking the artwork to be more fun and accessible, we were able to help them achieve their goal of reaching into a younger audience group. And we know this from the analytics from studying the podcast that we have helped them do that. So and the show has grown really well over time and it's won awards. So like there's been accolades and things that have drawn attention to their organization as a whole, but it's not been used as sort of a direct sales mechanism or anything like that. It's just not how a podcast works. And if you try to do that kind of direct sales on a podcast, you pretty quickly alienate your audience. So it's really best not to. It's best to just embrace what a podcast is for, which is engagement, having fun, or shining a light on an issue, having a nuanced conversation, that type of thing. Yeah.
Infotainment.
Infotainment, yeah. And I would say... also people think they know what a podcast is. Like if I say to you podcast, what do you what do you primarily think of?
Me listening in the car, driving, commuting. I'm listening to a variety of different types of podcasts for business, some for, some true crime.
Of course, yeah.
Stories, right? Listening to people's opinions or their expertise it's listening to somebody with some thought leadership that can share, right?
And how does that make you feel when you're stuck in traffic?
Well, if I'm paying more attention to the podcast than, some idiot that cut me off, that's probably a much better place to be, right? Mindset.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's sort of, I find the same thing. I always listen when I'm commuting and it kind of just takes your mind to a slightly higher place where suddenly you don't feel like you're wasting time. As you're stuck in traffic or you're commuting on the bus or you're doing the dishes or you're standing outside your kids' preschool in the rain waiting for them to get let out of school or whatever it is that you're doing in those liminal spaces that would otherwise have been kind of just killing time. Now suddenly you're enriching your life in some way. And that's the real gift of an audio podcast. But then, of course, now we've got, we're stretching into video podcasts. Like people are starting to take their conversations from audio to audio and video. And then we've also got all kinds of genres of audio podcasts, like audio fiction podcasts and narrative podcasts. So like ones that kind of stretch beyond the basic conversation and are a little bit more story-driven, immersive, and compelling. And so those, I personally love audio because I think you have the most freedom to be creative for the least amount of money. Right, whereas I think with video, if you want to have the equivalent freedom to create great video, you basically need a huge like Hollywood budget, right? So I think like with video, mostly what I'm seeing is it works really well for podcasts that are conversation driven, and it's fun to chop up clips from your recording and put them out on social and things like that to kind of help build a wider picture. So we're really seeing this kind of cross-platform approach that is happening more and more with our clients. And, I definitely support that, but I do see some downsides in terms of creative flexibility that you lose if you decide to do everything in a kind of convergence way.
Yeah. So you mentioned that some of the analytics and things that you see to understand the audience. What are some tools or resources that you could share that podcasters or people are thinking about getting into podcasts? What are some of those, tools that you found? And after doing this for a while, I'm sure that you've come across lots of different tools, but what are your kind of favorite go-to tools to help with those analytics and understanding the audience and,
Right.
those types of things?
Well, it can be overwhelming because one thing to note is that, like Apple and Spotify gather different analytics. So when you're trying to make, let's say you've got your podcast out on both of those platforms and maybe some others, and you're trying to make broad statements about the performance of the show, but it's like you're kind of comparing apples and oranges, like different things are being measured. So, I mean, there are some tools and some platforms that have developed ways of kind of consolidating this information through formula. We use a platform called Co-Host. It's a Canadian platform with excellent analytics. And that's where we publish most of our shows. If our clients feel strongly that they would rather publish on a different platform, then we'll do that. Whichever platform we're using, we can normally see things like geography, like where people are listening. We can get a sense of how long they're listening for. And we can get a sense of like where in the podcast most people are dropping off. And if they're dropping off like at the 50% mark, let's say, we might take a hard look at like what's going on right there in the podcast, and do we need to change it up? Do we need to shorten the overall length? Do we need to add a teaser right at the 50% mark that keeps them listening into the second half, things like that. So we use the analytics to inform the creative quite a bit, and that allows your podcast to organically improve over time, because that's something that I think people need to understand, is that a podcast is an organic entity that grows and changes over time. And so you need to allow it the freedom to do that. And at JAR, we try to take a really data-informed approach. So if the data is telling us that our ideas aren't working, then we'll change our ideas and try to do something that is going to be more palatable to the audience, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of data that we look at. I'm a big believer in consumption rate. I think it's that's sort of the percentage of the show that people are listening to. I think, to me, that's the most valuable metric to pay attention to, because you can look at the downloads, and you definitely want the downloads to be not plummeting. You want them to be going in the right direction. But it is possible to buy downloads. It is possible for bots to download your podcast. It is possible for, those numbers to be artificially inflated. And I would just ask, I would call those vanity metrics. Sometimes I'll have to talk to people about that. Like, I know your boss wants to see bigger numbers, but ask your boss if they want a whole bunch of bots listening for 3 seconds and then dropping off, or if they want lower numbers, but they want those people coming back week after week to hear your show and spending hours with your brand, right? Like, which is more valuable? And I would argue that a smaller number listening more intently is much more valuable. And I also believe that if you get that equation right, so that your listen through rate is good and strong, and I'm talking about, like, I think the industry average is somewhere around 55-60%. I like to see it upwards around 75-80 or more. So that's what we strive towards at JAR. And if you're seeing that, then you know that you are putting out material that is striking a chord with your audience. And you will see your downloads go up at that point, but it will happen as a byproduct of having good content that's hitting the right audience rather than some sort of vanity metric purchase download type scenario.
Right.
Yeah.
Want to start a podcast but don't know where to begin? At Poderific, we don't just produce podcasts, we help you create auditory experiences that will captivate your audience. Our state-of-the-art podcast recording studio, powered by Peppershock Media, is designed for creators like you. Record with high-quality equipment supported by our expert team and distribute your podcast across major platforms like Apple and Spotify. Whether you're launching your first episode or you're a seasoned podcaster, we got you covered. Visit Poderific.com today to learn how we can help you produce, record, and share your story with the world. Your podcast deserves to be Poderific.
Yeah.
And so when you look at metrics, because I think that there's a number of tools out there, I think we look at listen notes and we look at, variety of different ones. Do you typically look at those things too and use that?
Yeah, we look at listen notes. Listen notes is a good consolidation of different things. It's a very interesting reflection, I would say. Yeah, for sure. And that can tell you, you can learn also more about even like the gender of who's listening or watching. You can learn even down to, in some cases, the company. There are tools that will allow you to listen to the company or figure out the company down to the IP address, not down to the person, but down to the company level. So, you might be able to figure out if anyone in government is listening to your podcast or anyone at a competing organization is listening to your podcast. Or like if you're in sales, you might be able to see, oh, there's someone at this company that listens, like a lot of people at this company are listening to our podcast. Maybe we ought to reach out and see if they want to buy something. Right?
Yeah.
So it can be used like that. It's also, podcast can be a great sales tool in general, like for, educating a potential buyer in a particular area that you're an expert in. So let's say you do a real estate podcast and you talk about the value of renovating an old house or something like that on your podcast. You could send that to someone who's looking at character houses in your in your city, and use it as a talking point and a way to keep a discussion going with a potential client. So those are sort of ways that it can be used. I mean, there's the other analytics, though, back to the analytics thing, the other analytics that we sometimes look at is sort of the podcast neighborhood. So what other shows are people who listen to your show also listening to? And that can tell you a lot about the tastes of your audience. Like, maybe predictably, if you make a business show, they're listening to other business shows. Oh, but look, there's also a strong contingent of your audience that's listening to, I don't know, true crime or faith-based shows or something like that. That can give you some insight into who you're dealing with and who you're talking to. And you can use that to inform the content to make it even more relevant to them. So this is it's possible to tell an almost creepy amount about your audience, and
Right.
I think people underutilize that feature, and I think it's really, really interesting and important to pay attention to the data.
Oh, I like that too. And it's nice also when you do some pod swaps with other people who are in your genre, because all ships rise with the tide, right? I mean, we're not there.
That's a great point. Yeah.
We're helping each other, and that happens a lot with me now. It's where, if I have somebody on the show that also has their podcast, or vice versa, then it's like, hey, we should do a pod swap so we can both, share our audience. And it seems to be another way to help, kind of promote your own, but
It's
also
so interesting. Yeah. And I love that about podcasting, right? Because it's not viewed as honing in on somebody's audience. It's viewed as strengthening the conversation in the area that your show is about. It's viewed as a sort of an educational exchange or something like that. And like you said, that rising tide floats all boats attitude. I love that about podcasting. Definitely. And so, figuring out what other shows are in your podcast, quote unquote, neighborhood, and, would those be good shows to either drop a little ad promo on if you have a few advertising dollars burning a hole in your pocket. Or maybe something that doesn't involve money, but is just a simple feed exchange or feed swap or host guesting exchange or something like that, where you draw attention to each other's shows. Because, I mean, the number one way that people find podcasts, YouTube is very powerful, obviously, but I think traditionally it's been word of mouth. And it's also been by listening to other podcasts and hearing a promotion for your show from someone they already trust.
Right.
So like I listen to the Noiser network a lot because I'm a history buff, and I really like, there's a show called A Brief History Of, where they just kind of, this soporific British man just talks to you in, tells a story in the present tense, sort of set in history. So he'll be like, it's a foggy day in 1492, you know, so somebody is walking towards the docks, you know. Anyways, I listen to that, and then while I'm listening to that, I'm going to get an ad for, like, there's a new Sherlock Holmes series on Noiser. I think it's Hugh Bonneville reading the stories, and it's not an audio book. It's a scripted adaptation of some classic Sherlock Holmes stories. So it's acted out with voice actors and stuff. And it's really good, and it's the same kind of Noiser production. It's like understated, not over the top sound design. I really like it, and so that, but I wouldn't have found that had the host of my history show not said, "Go check this out." You know,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Endorsements help quite a bit.
Endorsements, yeah,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, and networking, and then that extends to like going to podcast movement if you can, or maybe something in your local community that's podcast driven, where you can get out and find other creators, because we're also isolated now, right? And it's really nice to come together as a community in person when you can.
Yeah, for sure. So, along the same lines of, you know, being able to utilize tools, and, you know, there might be some people out there that are just trying to figure out how to get started, what to do, where to go, you know, the different, I mean, there's so many different platforms and things like that, but what
Yeah.
advice would you give to somebody that's contemplating on starting their own podcast?
So if you're contemplating starting your own podcast, and first of all, you kind of have to decide, do you want to DIY it and learn as you go, or do you want to hire help?
Yeah.
And depending who you are and what kind of expectations you're dealing with around your marketing department, for example, you might want to go the professional route so that you come out of the gate strong. But if you're DIYing it, you know, really, and I would start with audio because it's simpler. There are really robust and affordable tools that you can use. A really good one that's kind of leading the industry right now is called Descript. I don't know if you use that one. It's
I've heard of it.
yeah,
We're
it's super cool
Riverside.
because yeah. So Riverside is also awesome. So we use Riverside too. Riverside is great for recording, and they record both audio and video, which is fantastic.
And streaming.
We
You streaming
yeah,
from this platform,
they
and
do. Yeah, they stream, and then you can kind of what we do is we export that into this program called Descript, and Descript is a really powerful editing tool that allows you to, it allows you to, I think you can actually record in Descript now. I may be wrong about that, but we don't do that. We record in Riverside. But Descript is cool because you don't have to be an audio editor to cut the sound. You can import your sound file into it, and then it will transcribe that whole sound file automatically, allowing you to do essentially a paper edit, like cut out the bits you want, keep the good bits. But when you do that paper edit, it actually cuts the audio too, and the video if you want. So you're kind of handling the edit from a document-based editing process, without having to go into full sound and video editing. Now, it's a little bit like cutting a podcast with Descript is sort of like cutting a birthday cake with a chainsaw. Like it's a little bit imprecise, but it's a really good start. And so if people are looking to DIY it, I teach creative writing for podcasting at the University of British Columbia, and I often recommend Descript to my students because I think it's a really good way to kind of get your hands dirty and get involved. And then if you can afford to work with an actual editor, though, you're going to bring the content up even higher. And then I think, just like paying attention to basic things like, do you have headphones in? Do you have a decent microphone? If you're doing video, do you have a little light that puts some light from the front on you so that you're not backlit? Have you considered your framing as you point the camera at yourself? So there's a lot to think about, but there's a lot of tools out there that kind of help you do it. Riverside, for example, has really great tutorials. Highly recommend checking those out. So there's, I would never want to discourage anyone from DIYing. I think that's how we learn. That's how we get good at processes. In the age of AI, it's like everybody wants to just be excellent at everything right away, and it's like, well, no, sometimes you actually have to learn stuff by doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think Riverside keeps evolving too, because they do have the magic clips that'll automatically, try its best using AI to get the clips for you that it thinks is going to be,
Oh, they have lots of AI tools embedded in there, background sound removal, like all kinds of things. Yeah. And automatic clip identification. Yeah. And what's your experience with that?
It seems to do okay. It's not like 100%. I think it still takes some human intelligence to use the artificial intelligence, but it does have that where you can also edit the words of the transcript out, and it'll automatically edit together now, which is kind of nice too, because we can go in and edit. The one thing that I will say is I had pronounced somebody's name wrong like through the entire episode. And so then we went back and modified it and then insert name.
Yeah. And in the olden times, you would have had to call that person back in and redo it, or at the very least you would have had to redo all your voice tracking, right?
Yep.
So no, absolutely. I think fixing
my voice and just plugged it in, and it did not take a whole lot of time at all to correct what I did wrong.
Yeah. And I think in that sense, you can use the AI tools that are embedded, as kind of like, as editing tools. Where I kind of lose interest personally in the AI capabilities is when we start hearing full conversations, pulled like Notebook LM or whatever, where they pull, like they take a white paper and they turn it into a dialogue. And that dialogue feels flat and weird to me. And I don't it's not, to me, that's not real connection. It's not real human beings striving to understand something better. It's just kind of icky. That's my personal take, but I do have students that use that as a study aid, though, where they'll take like a basically a paper or something that they're supposed to understand, and they'll dump that in and they'll have it discussed in audio form, and some of them learn better that way. But I think the editing tools, though, that like you're talking about, like where you can fix a pronunciation if your host pronounces the name wrong, or if there's eye gaze correction tools, which are interesting. So if you're doing a video podcast and it's difficult to follow the teleprompter and also look at the camera and look down at your notes or whatever, there's eye gaze correction software that can be utilized. It's a little creepy too. I find it looks a little off. But it'll get there. It's definitely evolving. And so, these things are helpful, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about ways to promote the show. Now you're into it. You're getting your podcast going. You're starting to get more downloads. What are some kind of things that you do? I know we talked about, ads and doing cross promotions, but are there, specific things that come to mind when I say, how are you going to get your podcast listened to, downloaded, subscribed to? What are some tactics that you can maybe share that have worked for you and your customers, your clients?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a wide range because we've dealt with everyone from like small nonprofits all the way up to, behemoths like Lululemon and Amazon, right? So,
Yeah.
when we work with a client, we normally do an audience growth strategy or plan. And when we do that, what we do is we sit down with them and we ask them to detail what are their owned channels that they already have access to. So maybe they've got a company newsletter, or they've got this many followers on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn, and we sort of make a big, list of all of their owned channels. And sometimes it's funny things like we have an annual convention in Detroit, or like it could be some on the ground kind of analog things that are also channels that are opportunities to promote a podcast. So we make both digital and analog notes.
Yeah.
And then we look at also what about this podcast has the potential to earn media coverage. So maybe there are some trade publications in the vertical that this company exists in, where some of the topics being discussed on the podcast might make good articles. Maybe we make a list of comparable podcasts where the host might be able to show up and talk about a topic that is featured on the podcast. Maybe they have local relevance, and so we'll look up like local newspapers or local radio stations that might be interested in covering some of the things that have happened on the podcast. Like we make a podcast, for example, for BC Schizophrenia Society, and during COVID, it came out that people with schizophrenia were more likely to suffer really ill effects from COVID, and sometimes like the morbidity rates were higher. And so there were questions around why that was when people were still striving to understand COVID. And that was actually newsworthy. That broke news and got featured on The Current on CBC Radio nationally because it was very, very specific to our area. And we had top experts weighing in, and we were aware of the issue and the problem kind of earlier than anyone else because we were focused on that area. So thinking about earned media, like what headlines could you put out there that would be timely and would capture attention in the wider media? And then finally, paid media. Do you have a budget to actually purchase ads on other podcasts? So to a certain degree, social media ads and things like that as well. We have dabbled with those, although I normally advise people if they have limited advertising dollars, you're better to spend those on actual podcast ads because there's fewer barriers to someone clicking on your podcast if they're encountering the ad in a podcast listening space, right? Like they're already listening to a podcast, they hear an ad for your show, all they have to do is click follow because they already have the podcast app open on their phone or whatever. Whereas if they come across an ad for your podcast on Facebook, or on TikTok, they're scrolling through TikTok. They're not listening to podcasts at that moment. So it's a bit more of an extra step for them to go. Not that they would never do it, but it's less likely. So we find that the click-through rates are better on podcast to podcast ads. So we evaluate owned, earned, and paid channels, and then we sort of put together a tailored plan based on that sort of. And then of course we're also asking, where is your audience? So if you're a company that has a really big presence on LinkedIn, but you don't have a YouTube channel, but you want to reach people under 30, you maybe have some thinking to do.
Right.
Right? Perhaps you need to put a little TikTok thing together, or perhaps you need to put some clips on YouTube, some shorts, right? And consider starting a channel. So that's the kind of conversations that we have. And there's really no one right way. It really is about the audience that you're trying to reach, where that audience likes to hang out, And then also, I'm a big believer in putting the right kind of content in the right place. So, for example, if you're going to do an ad, you know how when you pull up to to pump your gas, now on some of the pumps, there'll be like a little screen, because of course everywhere has to be a screen with ads.
Yes,
So now
right.
now you're pumping your gas and there's some ad playing, right? So thinking about like what would actually work in that context, like what would work in that context, and tailoring some of your content. So rather than just throwing a random clip out there, thinking about like, can you do some direct address to someone pumping gas, and then encourage them to check out your show. Like, so it's really like, it's a fun and creative challenge to think about promotion, even, and don't, like I said, don't knock real world stuff. Don't knock getting a group of people together. We just did an event at the planetarium here in Vancouver where we had a brain scientist and a geneticist talking about the power of music and the inheritability of musical talent. And this was for the Genome BC podcast that I mentioned earlier, Nice Genes. And we had, 200 people show up on like a Wednesday night to listen to a live taping of the podcast. We had a musician. We made it entertaining. And that was 200 people that didn't know about the show that knew about it after. They came to see the scientists and they left knowing about our show. So things like that, that kind of real world connections, I think, are quite important as well.
Oh, I love that idea. That's a great idea to do a live recording at an event. That's genius.
Yeah, or maybe you're going to a conference or something like that. Can you set up a little booth where you ask people a particular question and then edit that together later and give everybody a QR code that allows them to access your show later or something like that. So like that kind of hands-on stuff goes a pretty long way.
I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience here on our marketing journey that we've gone on together, Jen?
No, just thank you for having me. You've been very, you've listened to me ramble, but as you can tell, I love talking about podcasts and thinking about them because I think they're one of the most authentic and direct ways to really connect with people. And from a marketing perspective, that's very powerful, but just from a human perspective, it's extremely powerful and important. And what's important to me is that we have a high caliber of well-researched content out there that allows for nuance and discussion and helps break down silos. And I think a lot of people feel the same. And so if that describes you and you've got something to say, then I encourage you to try and say it through a podcast, because it's a really low barrier form of media, and it can really make a difference to deepening people's understanding of who you are and what you stand for, whether you're a brand or whether you're just an individual. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Jen. How can people get a hold of you if they're interested in working with you?
Well, they can just go to jarpodcasts.com. That's podcasts with an S, .com, or Jen with one N at jarpodcasts.com. And I'd be happy to chat anytime. I love to talk. I love to ideate. I love to do all that stuff.
Excellent. Actually, tell me, where did the name Jar Podcast come from? Why Jar?
Oh yeah, well, you know what? I should have led with that, but I'll close with it instead. It stands for Job Audience Result. And so every podcast has a job to do, every podcast has a target audience, and every podcast has a way of measuring its own success by which it will define its results. So that's how we look at every individual project that we tackle.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom today, Jen. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening now, the best thing that you can do for Jen and I both is share this with others that you know that need to hear what Jen had to say. And the other best thing that you can possibly do for us is give us a review on any of your podcast platforms that allow you to give us reviews, or 5 stars, whatever you decide. Right, Jen?
Or 6 stars, whatever. Yeah.
And with that, thank you for listening and enjoy your marketing journey.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Expedition podcast. Want to continue the journey? Don't miss out on new episodes. Subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Wouldn't it be great if there was one place you can go to get all the latest information and tips about marketing and advertising? The Marketing Expedition community is that place. People like you gather in our online community to build relationships with others and find the latest marketing trends, tactics, tools, and technology. We help you build your brand and your bottom line. Start your adventure today. Visit themarketingexpedition.com to find out more.